So in the previous lecture, we created the request body to generate the text with the private server. Now that we have the body, we need to actually use it by creating the network requests. So let's go ahead and create the network request. Guard let URL. So now we're going to create the URL at which we're going to send the data. So that's uppercase URL. And here we're going to write the string, which would be the server URL, the one we have at the top, right? The one we created here. This one right here, server-based URL. And we need to add v1 backslash chat backslash completion. How do I know this? Well, it's the one we interact with and we've used earlier. Here, you guys remember, we have v1 and then we have a chat. And you can go in your LM Studio and you will see it there as well, right? In the example, that's the method signature. And so we have a guard. So if it doesn't work, else we need to send a completion that it failed, right? So completion dot failure, and the type of failure is an NS error. And let's open and close parentheses and use this one, domain code and user info. So the domain would be invalid URL. Why? Because somehow we couldn't create the URL. Code 0, and the user info, well, there's no user info, so just put it nil. All right, and then we return. Okay, so we have the creation of the URL. So that's network URL creation. The next step is to create a request, create a request object using the request body that we created above. Var request is equal to URL request, and inside of this, well, we need to use the URL, which would be this URL here, so URL. Okay, now let's say what type of request this is. Well, this is an HTTP request, so HTTP method, and we need to, and that's not a get, that's a post. Why? Because it needs to be a post to interact with this, to create it. And then the type of request, this is a JSON request because it has JSON text inside and not XML or text. So add value application backslash JSON, and that's for the HTTP header field, that's the content type. So content type. There we go. By the way, as you can see, I have uppercase C, uppercase T. Usually it's not that important, it can work without, but that's the proper way of doing it. Okay, so now that we have the request, now we need to add the request body inside of the network. So do request dot HTTP body. What is the body of the request? I'm sure you guys know already. Well, we're going to use the request body that we created here. So the request, we add the body here, right? But we cannot just say is equal to request body. We need to say that it's JSON. So we're going to try to convert it to the Json serialization dot data, because it goes from text to JSON, and that would be with JSON object, and the JSON object here would be the request body. And there's no options, but let's add options and just open and close an array. So basically we have an array, but it would be empty. Okay. Here, so we need a catch. If you have a do, you need a catch. And that's why it's complaining, because if somehow it's not working, then we need to finish the completion that we had an error. So completion, and the error would be a failure of type, let's just say error. And this error comes from here. Whenever this fails, it creates an error. So that's how this is getting used. All right. And in the next lecture, we're going to finally do the actual request, the actual call.